G'day Internet, Max right here, and I am absolutely tickled pink today because I have a very, very dear friend of mine on the channel today. Just an absolute champion of liberty. I think it's fair to say you've dedicated the vast majority of your life to it. So please smash up that like button for G. Edward Griffin. Ed, how are you?
I'm doing very well, Max. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for asking. So it's actually been a good couple of years since we chatted. I think the last time we chatted, we were down at Acapulco for an Acapulco, and I think it was early on in the Trump presidency, and we were scratching our heads thinking about how that was going and talking
Mm-hmm.
about that, and just wow, in terms of where the world is now compared to 4 years ago, is just so much is changing. So I want to just for a little bit of an agenda for everyone to know what we're going to talk about here today. I want to talk a little bit about the liberty movement, freedom issues, something that Ed has been like my guiding star on for pretty much my entire adult life. And so I can't wait to check in with you and talk to you about some of those items. We'll talk a little bit about money printing. Of course, Ed is famous for his incredible book, The Creature from Jekyll Island. And in fact, I would argue I owe the vast majority of my wealth today to that book that you wrote, sir. So my forever gratitude for that. It was because of that book that helped me understand what inflation is, how money works, how fiat money works. And when Bitcoin came along, I had that incredible pool of knowledge to understand why it was so significant. And so 2012, I jumped in on Bitcoin with as heavy as I could. I reached out to you and I was like, Ed, we got to get on this Bitcoin thing. I'm not sure if I was the first, but I was certainly one of the first to introduce you to
You you
Bitcoin.
you were indeed.
And I certainly hope you're participating. I said it back then. One of the best things about Bitcoin was that it was the libertarians that were going to be the ones who inherit the earth. It was so exciting for me. And for example, just a little side note, we got Peter Schiff out there, and I love Peter Schiff. I think Peter Schiff is I think he's an incredible teacher. He's an incredible friend of Austrian economics, and he's obviously not a fan of Bitcoin. And one of the heaviest, the people are like angry at him. And honestly, I'm just sad. I just want Peter Schiff to get involved and enjoy these gains and not miss it. And I hope you're doing well in the Bitcoin world. I think you participated a little bit way back in the day, and I hope it's doing well for you. So, all right, there's a little bit of a catch up for everybody on stuff that you and I already know, but I hope that sets the scene for people to understand where we're at and our sort of history together. And I want to just check in to begin with the liberty movement. So we're living in a world with potential for, well, I think it just happened in California there where you are. You've got kids can't go to school without vaccines. We've got that's been floating around. We've got people being fired from jobs if they're not taking vaccine. We've got people demanding other people wearing masks and things like that. I think it's fair to say that the freedom of the average citizen across the world has had a pretty big hit in the last few years. I just want to I want to check in with you about. I guess you can try to take this wherever you want to take it, but where does this leave us? Where's the world at? What do we need to do? How scared should we be? All the kind of things that we need to know. What can we do to stop it? Just kind of you take this wherever you think is the most important message for people to hear right now.
Yes, I think that was a good way of phrasing it. Where is it headed, and what should our reaction be? And it's a bad topic for me to start with because it's kind of doom and gloom, And if you want to be honest about it, and that's what I try to be, it's kind of hard to pump a lot of sunshine into what's happening in the world today. So, but everybody can see that. They don't need me to tell them what's going on in the world, but they might wonder why it's doing it that way. What's happening? Is there anybody behind it? Or is it just that because the system got too old and like all empires, they crumble and fall? Those are the deeper questions. Where it's today is different from where it has always been since 1960 when I became aware. I took my first red pill back in 1960. and it's been a steady growth and learning process ever since then. But and there's no difference really between then and now, except degree. The principles are all the same. It's just, where are we on this gradient? Where are we on this? The needle has gone from the middle of the green. It's way, way, way into the red, you know, but it's still the same needle. It's the same chart. It's the same measurement, and that measurement is the growth of authoritarian governments around our personal lives and dictating to us what we can do and where we can go, and now even what we can think and say. And versus the other side of that, of course, is the shrinking of personal liberty to do all of these things. And that's been the contest that's been in the center of my mind ever since 1960, is which side do I want to be on? Well, I knew right away I had to be on what appeared to be the losing side, which was not a very happy choice. But when I joined the battle, we still had plenty of resources. Everybody was still talking about the free enterprise system and how great America was, and the free land of the free and home of the brave. And now you don't hear that so much anymore, except in poetry and in songs. You know, that's the way it used to be. So what can I say about what's happening is that we've moved along that scale from being very free, probably the most free people in the world, to now, here in the United States, we perhaps are close to being the most subjected and coerced and controlled people in the world. And the needle is still moving. So there's not much to be happy about that, except one thing. Back in the day when I was all charged up for the first time, it was hard to convince anybody that I had any basis for my concern. I mean, wake up, man, look, this is a great life, you know. What do you call talking about losing your freedom? You can still get in your car, go anywhere you want, you can do what you want, you're free. What are you talking about? And look how wealthy we are. We got money and all that stuff. So it was hard to get anybody really to take my concerns seriously. Well, now you don't have to read books and imagine and think ahead and study what are the parallels between our society today and ancient history. You don't have to do any of that stuff. Just look out the window, you know. It's at your door. I mean, the people are banging on your door now and demanding that you produce a certificate or something, or they'll haul you into prison or beat you over the head and drag you away if you don't wear a mask and things like that. And you just have to look out your door. Now people are even being discharged from their work. They want to work. Well, some of them don't want to work, of course. They'd rather get the welfare check, which is part of the trap. But anyway, most people want the dignity of earning their way in life. They want to have a high opinion of themselves. They want to be productive. They want to take care of those that they love and cherish. They want to be charitable to those who've had bad fortune and all of these things. But now it's just like, it's survival, man. It's survival. What am I going to do? I've got to take a shot, which I think is very, very bad for my health, very bad. Or I'm going to lose my job. What am I going to do? This is not the America that I was born into, and it's become, in many ways, I think perhaps on the verge of being the most totalitarian system that the world has ever seen. And that's a very harsh statement. It's very unpleasant for me to have to say it, but it is my true opinion. And we're going to see, I think, that fold out very plainly in the next month or two. It's revving up. So now, having said all that, that's the doom and the gloom, or at least it's the gloom. Is it the doom? No, I don't think it's the gloom, because we look at the positive side of that. Back in the day when I was talking about where this was heading, about look over there on the horizon, see that big black storm cloud over there? It's moving this way. We better do something about it. We need to prepare. And people said, are you kidding? It's so far away, I don't even see it. Now that storm cloud is directly overhead, and the lightning strikes are coming straight down. It's not something we look at off at a distance. So now people are saying, oh, what's going on? What do you think? What's going to happen next? What do we do about it? So it's easy to get someone's attention nowadays, but still the problem is that most people don't have much of a stomach for delving deeply into a topic. They want a quick answer, like, who are you going to vote for? You know, That's the kind of answer they're looking for. They want the man on a white horse. They want some politician to come along and tell them what they want to hear, and they're going to say, yeah, that's our man, and they'll vote him into office, and then he'll betray them, of course, like it usually happens, and the wars continue, the inflation continues, all the needle keeps moving regardless of who's in office, whether it's the good guys or the bad guys, supposedly, whichever side you're on in the political system. And but I'm worried because the depth of understanding of people is not as deep as it needs to be if they really want a solution. It's easy to raise the rabble, so to speak, and say, what are we going to do about this? I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore. And it's easy to get people angry and out in the streets and chanting and yelling and so forth. But I'm afraid that in this environment, false leaders can come along. And because our enemies know they knew long ago that this is coming, and they knew what we would want leaders to lead us out of the morass. So they're very obliging. They provide the leaders themselves. The controlled opposition is one of their favorite tactics. That's the part that concerns me, because even though the multitude is waking up to the problems, I don't think they've arrived at the understanding yet that quite often the people that they turn to for leadership are put there deliberately as plants to lead them astray. This is the very deep part of the thing, and it takes a little study. Most people would find that even hard to consider. They'd say, what is this guy? Wearing a tinfoil hat, a conspiracy theorist or something? But it's time for them to look a little deeper and realize that throughout history, every major act of history came about because of conspiracies. It's the most common element in history. And people who scoff at conspiracies, especially today, I feel sorry for them because they've never read a history book and they don't really understand what's going on today. Of course, there are real conspiracies out there, and this whole COVID thing is perhaps the greatest example. And if you can't see that, can't see through that, it's pretty sad. But many people cannot. They know they don't like what's happening, and they think it's because it's the darn Republicans or the darn Democrats or the darn communists or the Nazis or something, and they don't realize it's they themselves because they keep accepting solutions from people that don't really have solutions except to get rid of the other guy. They like to turn it into a personality conflict. That's the bad guy, or that's the bad political party. Get rid of them and turn to us and everything will be fine. So I'm rambling a bit, but I've got to cover all these points because you asked me for my view on it, and all of those things are meshed into it. And when you mix them all up in the pot, you come up with a mixture of optimism and deep concern, a little bit of both. But when you finally stand back and look at it, there's more optimism than concern, because there's no way that our civilization, in my view, could have turned this thing around unless some great catastrophic event or series of events got the people's attention. And there's a joke about that. You probably have all heard that they say that there's this joke about the farmer, as his city cousin visited him, and they went out and they had hooked up the donkey to the cart, and they were going down the road, and the donkey stopped, and so the farmer gets out and hits the donkey with a board across the snout, and the donkey jumps up and starts moving again. And the city slicker kid says, well, what did you do that for? That's a terrible thing. He said, well, first, the donkey does pretty good, but first you have to get his attention. And it's kind of a funny joke, but it sort of applies to humanity, because people don't want to budge away from their pleasures and their pastimes and their illusions unless you get their attention. And I think what's happening today is the event that certainly is getting everyone's attention. So now people are opening their minds, they're asking questions, and it's up to us. Max, you've been, fighting this good battle for as long as I've known you, and many of us, and people are now paying attention. Say, what did you say a couple of years ago? Weren't you talking about this? And it's our opportunity now, if we do our part well, to change things and turn this around. We're headed into rough times, even more rough than we now know. But if we don't get everyone's attention, there's no way to go through this. So that's the battle we're in, and that's what I'm prepared for. And it's going to be one heck of a battle, but I'm ready for it.
Yeah, so much to add in there. So I've really noticed that that change in conversation over the decades. It used to be trying to get people's attention to understand that there's something that needs to be done quickly, because every minute you delay, the strength and force of evil grows and grows and grows. And in order to actually combat it, like we got to act now. And every minute it just gets harder and harder and harder. And that used to be getting people's attention to do that. That was hard. And I've kind of noticed a different problem now. Now, it's especially sad for me to even think about and say, but now it seems to me that freedom doesn't even live in people's hearts anymore. It's not there. They're not there. It's not something they can understand. It's not something they can articulate. It's not something they think is worth fighting for. I think back to previous generations, and I think, if I was 20 years old in 1916, I would have been sent off to go and live in a trench in Europe for 2 months. And if the disease and rats didn't kill me, I was going to get told to stand up and run at a machine gun. And tens of thousands of men had the courage to do it because they valued freedom and a better generation for the next. I think of the guys who landed on the beaches of Normandy and just got mowed down left and right and bled the sea red with blood. And they had the courage to do that because freedom lived in their hearts. They were willing to die for it. They wanted to leave the next generation better. And it was a concept worth dying for. And these guys were willing to die for these principles, for these concepts. I think of the founding fathers. Right? They started a war that every single one of them knew was most likely going to kill them, and it would be their end. But the cry was, "Give me liberty or give me death." And now I see the current generation. It's like, well, do as you're told, yell at your neighbor, get them to comply, or you won't be allowed to go to a concert. Okay, I'll do it. Do it. Tell me what I got to do, and so I can go to the concert. And it's just there's just that freedom isn't valued, and the cluelessness. If I can be, I'll be arrogant. I know you wouldn't be, because you're much more of a gentleman than I'll ever be. But the cluelessness of people and how far away their understanding is of freedom is the part, to me, that is the most terrifying of all of these things. And on that topic, I want to share with everybody. Ed here wrote a piece called "The Future is Calling," and if you put into Google in quotation marks, "The Future is Calling," it's on a website called my mind's escaped me. Where is it, Ed?
Freedom Force International.org.
Mm-hmm. freedomforceinternational.org. But it's not necessarily that easy to find if you go to the site. But if you Google it, "The Future is Calling," freedomforceinternational.org, you'll get the privilege of reading an essay that Ed wrote many, many years ago. I think just a few years after 9/11, and it's one of the most eloquent articles in explaining what freedom is. And I highly, highly recommend you check that out. In fact, I'll put a link in the description here, so you guys can access that easily. And while you're at Freedom Force International, there's a good chance to sign up to Ed's newsletter. I'm sure there'll be a place to sign up there. If not, needtoknow.news is another place where you can sign up to get some news from Ed. He does a regular update on the world's news. This is the kind of stuff you're not seeing on mainstream TV. You're not going to hear about it otherwise, unless you're getting it from these underground channels. And that's something, actually, these underground channels is something I want to talk about more later. But just to my point, Ed, are you noticing, if does your experience concur with my experience, that freedom just doesn't seem to be in the hearts of people these days?
Well, yes, but I would add to it that that's how I felt back in 1960.
And every time I talk to you, you always remind me of this, and it always gives me hope.
So I'm not disagreeing with you, but I'm saying that there's another dimension to it. Before I snapped alive, and I was in the corporate world. I was trying to climb the ladder. I was all about me. I was a young guy, got myself a beautiful wife, had a child. I was making some money. I was worried about how am I looking, am I going to have a nice home, a nice car, me. And then I discovered what was going on in the world. I discovered I had this crusader gene, and suddenly I discovered there was a part of me that I didn't know was there, and it turned out to be the major part ever since. I suspect that most people have this separation sometimes, especially when they're young. especially when they're young, there's a tendency to be more self-centered. But when when you wind up with a family, then you look at these kids and you think, oh my God, I did that. These lives are now my responsibility, and something changes. And as you have experience and you mellow a little bit, and your ideas change. And I think honestly, Max, that if we look in around the world today, in the United States we don't see a lot of news about it, but over in Europe and in all parts of the world, actually, there's a great rebellion, and you see these people on the streets by the millions, and there are large gatherings of people on the streets here in the United States that you may not even know about it because it doesn't wind up in the main press, but it could be in your hometown and you wouldn't even know about it because they go to great lengths to make sure it doesn't hit the mainstream media. And when you look at these people, you may say, well, they don't really understand the whole picture, like I was referring to a moment ago, but they do understand that their liberty and their freedom is being robbed, and they don't like it. Now, maybe 2 years ago, they didn't give a hoot, but now they do. I think there's this freedom thing is genetic. I think it's in our genome, and I don't think. I mean, atrophy, I think, can go into work. If you don't exercise anything, including your instincts, they probably get pretty weak. But I think it's there, and I really have hope that even for the most disinterested, misinformed, illusion-filled, naive individual in the world, once they see what's unfolding today, and they discover, quite by accident because of the underground media, they discover that this is not just a normal thing, that this is planned, and that there are people who are benefiting from this, and they suddenly connect the dots, then something will happen. Maybe they'll discover they have a crusader gene too. I think that comes with a human, by the way. I think all humans have it. It's sometimes we just don't listen to it. But when the noise gets loud enough and the pain gets bad enough, I think most people will discover that they have it.
Yeah, I hope so. You've talked about, we kind of danced around this issue a little bit here. You said there's lots of protests going on. We're not hearing about it. I think the for lack of a better word, let's call the powers that be, are absolutely phenomenal at making us feel alone. They're just superb at it, at making us believe that there's no one else like us. We're in the vast minority, and they do this a number of different ways: suppressing news, not letting us see protests around the world, et cetera, et cetera. And I feel like there was a window there for just the last kind of 4 years, especially. But places like YouTube, places like Twitter, places like that were just incredible places where these communities were online, and you found them. And then for better or worse, there was just an incredible community centered around Donald Trump, called the Donald.win was the website, and before that it was a subreddit on Reddit. And the feeling of community that I know all of the participants got from that was just incredible. And post January 6th, there was, a lot of these people got these websites got deplatformed, YouTube's, Twitter's, Facebook's, all these accounts got taken down. And I think for a vast majority of people, it became a very, very lonely world. It restricted the flow of information for sure. But I think an even bigger impact was the feeling of loneliness, and then you throw in COVID and lockdowns, and you can't even go and meet at your church. You're not hanging out with friends and discussing your thoughts and things at the local football game, etc. You add all that in there, and I think it was an incredible time and opportunity which they seized to move very, very quickly at a time when we couldn't coordinate and couldn't organize. And I'm just a member of a number of different groups online. And they can be totally non-related. But if I go to obviously I'm involved in lots of crypto communities and things like that, but also non-crypto communities. And there's always a room dedicated to COVID news, liberty information, freedom information. There's these, I think it's we've been decentralized into a whole bunch of little communities. There's your mailing list, there's my mailing list. There's ways that we get information out, but it's slower. and it's more difficult to coordinate. Like if we wanted to go like march on Washington for a million, it would be harder to get the word out. It would be slower to get the word out, but I think we would get the word out. Anyway, I just want to just talk about that list a little bit. What do you see happening in that world of communication? Are we in a better place than we were? Are we in a more vulnerable place? Can we move effectively and efficiently? Where do we lie in this? And is it something that we've gained ground on or lost ground on?
I'm glad you brought that up because it's a topic that most people might not even consider to be too important because they think, well, it's obvious. We had a good thing and we lost it. I think what happened was a very good thing. It's part of that process I was talking about before. Things have to get really, first you have to get their attention, so to speak, Things have to get painful, and that was very painful to lose all that camaraderie and that ease of forced those who were involved to change their orientation from being a spectator into being a player in the game. When they realized that they were totally dependent on mechanisms that were in the hands of our enemy, this was an awakening. So now what are they going to do about it? They're going to just wait until it opens up again and expect our enemy to say, oh, we changed our minds. We're going to let you communicate again. No, it forced them to realize that, hey, the responsibility for bringing about change is with us, not with somebody else. It's not necessarily even the leader. It's not the technology. We have to build our own systems. We have to become self-reliant. And that is the spirit that America needs to recapture, is the spirit of independence and self-reliance, and not dependent upon that abstract, unknown, big brother out there someplace, whether it's government or whether it's the communications media or what have you. And as a result of it, we're seeing now, I think, very strong, resilient alternative sources being built that are going to be, I don't think our opposition really envisioned that there would be so much resilience in response to that clampdown. It's now almost to the point, I believe, that we can communicate as freely as we ever did. And we're beyond the control of the big tech, pretty much, if we do it right anyway. But that, of course, the penalty is that we're not reaching out to the sleeping masses. They don't know we're here yet. But even that is leaking because people now are not just sitting back and just saying, well, everybody will see this on Facebook. Now they're saying, no, I've got to send something to my friend. I've got to communicate with them. And I think we're approaching the point now where the pamphlet and the printed report is going to return to the movement. The America was founded on pamphleteering. I think it's going to be rejuvenated on pamphleteering or things like that. We all have printers in our homes. And if we stock up on, instead of stocking up on cheap white wine, we could stock up on paper and ink. And we can produce things and communicate with many, many people, whether we've got the internet or not. And even that might be more valuable than, face-to-face is always better than on the cyberspace. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that, yeah, everything you say is true, and I agree with it, but maybe, not maybe, I think certainly it was a good thing. It was necessary. I'm glad it happened, because now we're doing it right this time. We're building our own means of communication.
Yeah, and I think, I remember, so Dan Larimer, for the cryptocurrency people out there, he is the creator of EOS, BitShares, Steemit, and a number of other protocols out there. I remember he said something to me I thought was quite profound. He said that, it's like I said something along the lines of, we're lucky to be in the time of blockchain and cryptocurrency and Bitcoin and things like that. And he said, well, so it's reflecting the market, meaning when people want it, entrepreneurs step up and create it to satisfy the market. And he was saying, okay, we used to be able to, because people came to, with Bitcoin, because people came to the realization of what money was, enough people did, thanks in huge part to your work, the webs that have spawned out of the creature from Jekyll Island, I can't even imagine. But so because of that, then, I personally, I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that Satoshi Nakamoto read the creature from Jekyll Island. I'm sure of it. Of course, I can't prove that, but I'm sure of it. And so because that happened, entrepreneurs came and people came along and invented it and built it. And then you have and then they crack down on on the big platforms like YouTube and whatever else. And so then entrepreneurs are now creating these decentralized technological platforms, things that can't be censored, etc. And that's another whole conversation there. Like wouldn't it be nice to live in a world where there aren't tyrants suppressing speech on these platforms, political purposes, but because I would like to live, be on a platform where there's not nefarious things going on. I mean all the bad stuff that we know can happen. But in order to protect political speech, I think we have to build the stuff that's non-censorable, and that brings about some stuff like some child porn is an example, terrorism is another example, stuff that you wouldn't want to have there. But we have to build tools that help other people. But I think it's absolutely essential for liberty, or else there's just no way for it. It becomes a dystopian world where all communication is censored. Any thoughts on that before I move on to the next question?
Well, actually, I heard what you said, and I saw it as a confirmation of what I was saying too. So we're in total agreement. We have to go through this. It's a good thing. In other words, it's. I heard a comment in church. I don't often listen to the sermons in church. Sometimes my mind wanders. But there was one a couple of years ago. That this preacher said, "Be thankful for your enemies." And everybody said, what? He said, because without them, you would have no one else to blame. And I thought, well, that was a humorous way of making a very solid point. I think we should be thankful for our crises and our challenges, because without them, we would never rise to our full potential. So that's the way life is. For every force, there's an equal and opposite force. That's pretty well established in physics. So when these forces come against us, we have to rally, and we will rally. It's part of our nature. We will rally against it and develop an equal and opposite force. I don't think the war will ever be won one way or the other. This contest will probably go on for as long as humans exist. But so once we get used to the idea that it is conflict, and that you better be in the arena if you want it to come out right, in your lifetime at least, or where you are, you have to get in there and defend your side of this contest. Otherwise, the other guys will win. All right, a lot of us never thought about that before. We thought it was a shoo-in. It was a slam dunk. We just were born into a system that was all, roses and cherry bowls and so on. It was wonderful. I never realized in my youth that someday, and maybe very soon, I would have to be responsible for perpetuating this or continuing it. But now I know, and I think people are responding to that all over the place. So, I think it's, again, that's my theme, I guess, for this discussion today. I'm optimistic because of these challenges, because it's bringing people to the point where they will rise to their highest potential, and that's what we need.
I did just realize that earlier you think you were going to say the good, the bad, and the ugly of the movement, and I interrupted you before you got to the good, and maybe we've covered it since. But I just wanted to remind you, was there something else that you wanted to add in terms of what is there good at the moment? What's to be excited about?
Well, I think I pretty well covered it. That's it. And you could argue that that's it's kind of silly that people rationalize their troubles and say, well, it's not so bad after all, when it really is. And I don't think I'm doing that. I've thought about that. I really believe what I've said. I don't think this is rationalization. I think if you back far enough away and look at the big picture, you see that formula working everywhere in nature and in human interactions. There is this contest always going on, and it's not always peaches and cream. But so once you accept that, you just jump into the fray, and that's what you do.
Yeah. So you've been very, very. I think you throughout my entire. I think I first came across you. It was like there was dial-up internet in America, and one of the very first things I downloaded was an audio speech from you, an audio of the creature from Jekyll Island. And so I think I've known you since I was like 20 or so, something like this. No, of you since I was 20 or so. And you've just had so many predictions over the years, and they've just been quite brilliant. And so, my next question is about the future. Um, let's take let's take some optimistic predictions. If things were to get better and rapidly in in the next decade or two, what does it look like? How do we get there? What's required to make this situation to make it to get significantly better?
That perhaps is the most important question of the millennium, because history is loaded with tyrannies that have risen and then been overthrown by those who were oppressed. The great cost in treasure and blood, the masses rise up eventually against their tyrants, and they're overthrown, and there's great rejoice. But what then happens in history is that they're replaced by another tyrant exactly like it, or worse. Because people have a tendency to focus on what they don't want more than they focus on what they do want. So it's easy to say, oh, we got to get rid of this system or this tyrant. And anybody that helps in overcoming the existing tyrant we think is good, because they're against the evil. And we don't ask, well, what do they believe? And how would they act under the same circumstances? And maybe they don't even know themselves. All they know is they want to change. So what do I see in the future? I see that that's going to continue forever unless someone who's figured out the problem, like I think we have, intercedes and intervenes with the process and creates some kind of a mechanism to alter this process. And that means that, I hate to use the word, it sounds so bland, but it's an educational process. It means that we have to talk not only about events and challenges and physical things, but we have to talk about ideas and ideologies. We have to answer the question that you raised a moment ago. You said you liked my article on that's on Freedom Force. The future is calling, because it explains what is liberty, what is freedom. Most people have never given that any thought. They just think, you say, what is freedom? How do you define it? And they don't know. And they say, well, being out of jail, maybe that's it. So when people understand what liberty really is, and it's not that complicated once it's clarified, then the next question is, well, how do you perpetuate liberty? How do you fight the forces of evil with the tools that they use? They use very powerful tools, without yourself becoming corrupted by the power that you must have in order to fight that power. That's the challenge. How do you fight fire with fire without becoming an arson? I just thought of that. That's a pretty good analogy. And we're fighting big, powerful engines of government control, and we need the power to do that. But that very power is very corruptible. I mean, not corruptible, but corrupting. And how do you build a system where the individuals who hold that power cannot be corrupted by it themselves? And the end of that process of thinking led me to what we now call Freedom Force International, which I think is a blueprint that would work. As far as I can tell, it's never been tried before in history. People have always been satisfied with the idea that we got rid of that old tyranny, and now we have a fresh start, so let's see what we can do. I think it's a little bit too late at that point to wait until you've overcome the tyranny and say, how are we going to build this better? I think we need to have that figured out ahead of time. So that was the whole reason behind forming Freedom Force International and the principles that go into that. Now, I know we don't have time to go into that, and probably your listeners aren't that interested in it, but I just will say that the whole concept is based on the idea of leadership by example and not by coercion or by command. It's the idea of forming a holographic organization and unity among people, a system of society, holographic rather than a pyramidal one. And we're used to the pyramid form, where there's a leader or a group at the top that dictates everything, and then there's the middle management, and then all the rank and file carry out and do all the work. And that's how we live in almost every aspect of our lives. And the idea of a holographic organization where no one is able to force anyone else to do anything except by the power of example, and enlightened self-interest, teaching the principles of enlightened self-interest, that it's to your own benefit to do these things correctly, and using coercion only for those things that we as individuals have a right to use coercion for, and that would mean in defense of our life, our liberty, or our property. If we all agreed that that was the only justification for using coercion against anybody, then everything else is voluntary. And that's the only kind of a system I think that could survive without becoming corrupted. Because if the laws and the rules and regulations clearly said, no, you can't do that. I don't care if you did win the war. You still can't be the emperor. You still can't tell people to put a mask on their face when they don't want to. And now, if you could prove that not wearing a mask really did endanger someone's life, then you might have an argument. And that's an interesting point, because people claim that not wearing a mask would endanger someone's life. Well, they can claim it all they want to, but they can't prove it because it's not true. Scientifically, that has never been demonstrated, and it cannot be demonstrated. If they could prove it, I'd change my position. I'd say, okay, that's one thing that government could, force you to do if it really would harm someone else. It's like you can't give anybody the idea that they can drive 300 miles an hour down the main street. You got to have a speed limit because it protects lives, things like that. But you have to be very clear that your argument is based on fact and not just propaganda, and like it is today. So having said all that, we gave a lot of thought to how you would build a system based on principles of that nature. We put those principles into something we call the Creed of Freedom, and then we tag it along with something called the Code of Conduct, which, the Code of Freedom is the ideas behind it all. And the Code of Conduct is mostly what thou shalt not do certain things, And I've never met a person that couldn't agree with both the Creed of Freedom and the Code of Conduct. But once those rules are understood, then everything else we have to say is fair game. So now we can't have government telling you, what the minimum wage is, or what you should eat, or who you should hire, or even what you say in free speech and so forth. All of that is off the board. And once that is removed, now there's little reason for crooks and criminals of all kinds and psychopaths to want to go into government, because they wouldn't have the power to control the lives of their fellow citizens. They couldn't commit crimes, in other words, legally. So anyway, that's the short version of it, and anybody that wants to read it and maybe challenge it, that would be good. I'm really open. We've been open to challenge for many, many years. I'm happy to report that this sounds absurd, but it's true. The Creed of Freedom has been published now for, since 2002, I believe it went out. And I was scared to death, because once I put that into print, I thought, boy, all of these libertarians out there, all of these deep thinkers are going to cut me to the ribbons, They're going to say, yeah, that's not true. I've been in some of those debates, and they're ruthless. And I thought they're going to come after me. Not my opponents, but my friends, the free thinkers. And I've only had one. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't more than one, but only one ever got through to me, and I think we were able to answer that this argument was not valid. But anyway, I would welcome any challenge to it, because if it can be challenged successfully, then we got to change it if we're going to build a system that's going to last for more than 200 years. Anyway, now, getting back to your question, what does the future look like? It depends on whether or not we're successful in this experiment.
Well, okay, sorry, you keep going.
Well, I'm practically at the end. If I am right, and if we are right that it can be done, that you can build a system with sufficient power to overthrow a pre-existing tyrannical system, you've got a very powerful system that you now control. If you can design a system that would protect the world from that corrupting the individuals who held that power, then you have a shot at making a better world. Otherwise, if we don't do something like that, we're just going to go from one tyranny to another, with brief periods of relative liberty in between. I don't think that's the natural way.
Yeah, so something that and it's just an honor and a privilege to be involved in the crypto community the way I am. But something that I don't want to say it, something that occurred to me, something that I kind of hang my hat on, that I kind of, okay, this is this is where it's at. And one of the famous creeds of the crypto community is the revolution will not be centralized. And that kind of there were elements of your solution there, which is talking about decentralization, where individuals hold it in their hearts, they can, and there's no leaders to attack, etc. It's very much the creed of the blockchain world, the crypto world. And I would go what it's done is I would take it a step further, in that it's a forcibly violent resistant, or it's violent. There's no violence does no benefit in that world. There's no amount of guns or whatever that can hurt Bitcoin or crypto. There is, and that's just Bitcoin's the first iteration of the use of blockchain technology and it's in the form of money. But we see blockchain technologies coming along with and creating video platforms, creating social media platforms, creating whatever, and because everything else, if the incentive is there, if you can get control of a power center, an institution that controls people, has influence over people's thoughts and realities, if you can get control of it, you can use it for your own benefit, for your own propaganda, to support other things. And only when it's forcibly not that, and maybe it's forced by the mechanisms of mathematics, as in Bitcoin, but it renders violence absolutely useless. Just no amount of guns or nuclear missiles or anything can hurt the Bitcoin protocol. And that is its most powerful and potent weapon. And we see that leaking out into all different areas now, all the different DeFi projects. Just Bitcoin was just the first, stone in the pond. And just as blockchain technology just ripples out into DeFi, into all the other things, into things like Steemit, into things like Library, which is like it's a YouTube competitor built on blockchain, and et cetera, et cetera. I think that in my journey over the last few decades has led me to the point that this is the world. This is the world that is the path to where we need to get to, where just violence is rendered useless. And I go back and forth by saying it another way. It's like, maybe by mathematics, but violence is forced out of the equation. It's just rendered useless. It doesn't do anything, and so therefore there's no incentive to be a tyrant. It doesn't help. For every single industry and niche that is taken over by these provably fair, provably resilient, decentralized communities, that's just one more place where tyranny can't exist. And I just think it just goes step by step, and we take over the whole damn world. And that for me has just been the most exciting thing to happen over the last 10 years for sure.
Well, I agree with your main point there, that the concept, the blockchain, and all that conjures up is something that will exist as long as anybody wants it to exist. And violence, it's not a physical thing, and violence is a physical thing. So violence cannot destroy gold either. It's gold. I mean, it's the same analogy. Violence can certainly dampen the enthusiasm of people to do certain things, even though they are free. And we see the history of all civilizations and all religions, particularly religions tend to get stamped out by old religions get stamped out by new religions, and the ruling authorities will say, well, this religion is outlawed now. Well, and they can kill people. There are martyrs, and people get killed by the tens and hundreds of thousands for their religious beliefs. And that's not just one religion, many of them. And that you can't stamp it out. But you can stamp out people, of course. And and that's, of course, where it gets a little rough. It's the other part of the equation. You can't stamp out Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies or anything like that, because they're concepts. They're not physical, but you can sure make it difficult for people to use them. And in that world, you need a free society.
Completely agreed on all fronts. And so to go a little bit deeper and put that conversation in context, I feel like there's a limit to how far you can push humanity before humanity pushes back. And so like for example, in Venezuela, it's illegal to print it's illegal to trade with dollars, and it's illegal to print the inflation rate. Yet these things are happening because without those two mechanisms, people are just starving to death. And so they can't be. They will take on the risk. They will take on the persecution. They will take on being put in jail. They will take on doing all of this because it's death without it. And where cryptocurrency comes in as a tool is it makes it easier because it is censorship resistant, because it is relatively anonymous. There's no physical things you can keep it in your head. There's plausible deniability to it. Because there is no reservoir of bitcoins that we need to deposit them in a vault somewhere like you do with gold, and men with guns can come in there. Because it's decentralized, because of all of these things, I think it massively raises the floor. So, for example, gold, it can serve a purpose. We as individuals, we can try and find plumbers and electricians and grocery stores that accept precious metals for payment, all right? And we could go and do that. The problem is people could come and get shaken down, patted down, find your gold coins, your silver coins, and off to the gulags with you. Eventually, that's where that can get to, and it'll never work. Like it'll never get there because of that. Whereas now with crypto, they could just say, okay, full tyranny. They can just go around slaughtering everybody who's ever Googled Bitcoin, ever done anything, whatever. I get that. That can be where it gets to. But when you're starving, and when you've got a tool that is relatively censorship resistant, more so than anything else in history, relatively plausibly deniable. It's like, are you a Bitcoiner? Are you not a Bitcoiner? Do you have any Bitcoins? Like, pat me down, do what you want. Go, no, I'm not. Just those little changes mean people ignore the laws, because they always eventually, like tyranny becomes so oppressive, they eventually ignore the laws that they need to survive. Like with the example in Venezuela, they're still doing black market dollar trades just to be able to survive. It raises the floor because people go to the black market and ignore the laws faster. And so I think the gift of crypto is that it raises the floor where people reject tyranny, fight tyranny, and ignore bad laws faster than they otherwise would have. Does that give it a little more context?
Oh yeah, I agree with you totally on that. It raises the floor in the sense that it can, under certain conditions, become the black market actually, or an important part of it. So yeah, I'm a big fan of the black market, by the way. I think that means the real market. I know you agree with that. Everything else is black, and that's the white market. They got that all wrong. That's where people just exchange things on the basis of their mutual agreement. Period. End of discussion. There's nothing wrong with that. So yeah, I can see that we'll go through a period where some of the coins, the privacy coins especially, will be in that category. They'll know who's using them because they'll put spies into the system, and you'll be set up, and you'll make a transaction with your enemy and don't even know it. So we understand that's the risk of the black market. I mean, you can go into the black market in Moscow or Hungary or any place in the world, and when it was under complete communism, and buy just about anything you want to, but you never know who you're dealing with. It could be somebody that's going to turn you in, and you wind up in the gulag. So anyway, those are the pros and the cons, and that's what I was saying before. The forces on both sides are fighting each other, and you just have to expect that there's no free pass. We're going to have to get into the ring and fight like hell.
Agreed. So let me I want to change tack a little bit here with the few minutes we have remaining, and I'm sorry for all the viewers out there. They probably want me to ask you 50,000 Bitcoin questions, but Ed is one of my mentors, and like I said, a guiding star on philosophy and ethics, and it's just so many things. And so I just was very happy to geek out there on philosophy there with Ed for a little bit. But let's get to a little bit of nuts and bolts, and let's see if you have an opinion on this one. Huge debate at the moment. We've got all sorts of supply chain issues. We've got, just incredible amounts of people not working. We have all sorts of restrictions to free enterprise. We have a massively over-leveraged system where just debt is just consuming the world. All of these things would indicate and lead you towards the impression that we're going to have a massive deflationary event, a massive unwinding, stock market crashing, real estate crashing, Bitcoin crashing, everything crashing. And on the flip side, you have this thing where you've got the world's currencies of the world just printing seemingly endless amounts of money to offset that unwind. And so that piece of information leads you to believe that would lead one to believe that, of course, we're going into a very high inflation, maybe even hyperinflation type scenario. So, with that kind of a frame of the inflationists versus the deflationists, um, let's check in with the creature from, the author of the creature from Jekyll Island. What do you think that looks like? How does it play out? Is it just onward and upward from here forever? Is there a big deflationary event, a black swan event? What do you think is the most likely thing to play out from here?
Okay, that's a tough one because I'm not very good at. I'm pretty good at predicting the whats are going to happen, but I'm terrible on the whens. So I've learned not to put any dates on anything because I'm 99% wrong. I'm usually expecting the worst sooner than it happens. It gets there eventually, but I expect it sooner. So that it either tells me that there's a lot more resiliency in the system than I was aware, or that they've just kicked the can down the road a little bit further somehow. I think it's a little bit of both. So back to the question, what do I think is going to happen, inflation versus deflation? I think that we're approaching a point, Max, where it won't really make any difference because our monetary system is changing. The question begs the issue that we're going to be using the dollar or some identifiable currency as a measure of inflation or deflation. And I think that is to be questioned. What our enemy is planning to do now, they're trying to switch us over to a strictly, central bank digital currencies will be the main currency that will be approved by governments, and the one that most people probably will wind up using for their purchases, their primary purchases that they must have, like to pay the rent, or they want to buy groceries or food or whatever they really need. So in terms of that, so if central bank digital currencies become the primary currency for commerce, and that's what they want it to be, and if there's no limit to what those units how many units can be created is completely at the will of the government and the banks, well, not the government, the banks, which by this time will be recognized as the government, then the issue of inflation and deflation fades into importance because the only question is, do you have enough to buy what you want? And you'll be assigned that number. It won't be a result of your investments, or it won't be a result of your earnings. It'll be a result of your merit on the basis of are you a good citizen or not. And this changes everything. So now it doesn't make any difference how many units are required for a loaf of bread, as long as you get plenty of them in your allotment from the bank every month as a universal guaranteed income. Some people will have a higher level of that than others, and it'll be like living in the military. The generals make more guaranteed income, universal guaranteed income than the privates do. And as long as you obey orders, you'll have enough money to get everything that you need. You'll be given food, shelter, and clothing, and it won't make any difference what the numbers are. It's the question of, do you get enough or don't you? So it's hard to describe that because we've never seen that before in history. And you have to be in the military a little while. I wasn't there but only 2 years, but I saw that part of it, that money on the base was not an issue. As long as you're in the military, you have everything you need. Only thing you really want money for is the extracurricular things when you get off base and you want to have a little fun or send some money back to your family or something like that. I think if you take that and multiply it by 100, this is the kind of a society that they're trying to push us into, where money no longer becomes really money, it becomes what they now call social credits.
Yeah, okay. Interesting world. It's that is the top of the hour, and so we'll wind it up there. But let's let everybody know you've got a really fun event. About a big chunk of our conversation today was about free flow of information, important information. Let's hear about an event that you've got coming up pretty soon, an event that's an annual event. I've been to it before. And why don't you just give us a little bit of a pitch for that?
Great. I'd love to give a pitch for that because it's very much in my spyglass right now. It's called the Red Pill Expo. This is number 7, Max. It's not been 7 years because starting last year we decided to do 2 of them per year. So this is number 7 in the line, and the third one after the COVID theater began. So we're kind of proud of that because many people got cold feet and just ran the other way when things got tough. And we decided, well, we're in the arena, aren't we? So let's just plow ahead and see what happens. So that's what we're doing again this time. People are afraid to travel. They're afraid that they're not going to be able to get home. And I understand that. But in spite of all that, we're moving ahead, and I'm happy to report that the numbers are looking really good, and it's as much enthusiasm as there ever was. So what is the Red Pill Expo? Well, as the theme or the memes indicates, the idea is to take the red pill. That's the meme. Take the red pill, man, and wake up. See life the way it really is. Break out of your illusions. And that is the way we look at so many important things in our lives today. We've discovered, those of us who have taken the red pill, more than one to be sure, that almost everything of great importance, at one time we thought we understood them, but it was all illusion. Now we understand that the healthcare industry is not what we thought it was. You and I long ago figured out that the banking industry was not what we thought it was. A lot of people understand that the educational system is not what we thought it was, and you just go down the line, and all of the important areas of our lives, really, when you examine them today, are based to a large extent on illusions versus reality. So the whole purpose of the Red Pill Expo is not to deal with any one aspect of life, but to bring in all of these illusions that affect our lives. So when you go to the website, which is redpillexpo.org, you'll see a tremendous lineup of speakers, mostly professional people who have discovered red pills in their profession or in their personal lives, who now want to share what they learned to the rest of us. And it's quite an eclectic program. We talk about COVID, of course. We talk about healthcare. We talk about vaccines. We talk about the dollar, the banking system. We're talking about the educational system. We have a lady there who was a victim of MK Ultra. She was born into a family of her parents were CIA agents, and the parents literally sold her to the government at age 5 to put her into MK Ultra program. And she's telling her story, and this goes on and on. Just look at the program and you'll see that the topics are so varied and so important. Everybody, I think the main thing that we learned from taking our exit poll last time, almost all of the comments were that I thought this was going to be good, but I never dreamed I would get so much information that I didn't even know existed. In other words, these are people who, like you and I, we think we're pretty darn well informed until we run into something, well, wow, I didn't know about that, and away we go. So it's a way of sharing information, and it's highly informative, to say the least. And it's also invigorating and motivating because we get to realize that there are a lot of us out there. We are actually the majority. And the world really looks quite different that way than when you're just watching it through your television set. And so it allows people to make new friends, to build their confidence, to realize that we can turn things around. We share ideas, we form into groups and form a massive coalition against this onslaught of tyranny and collectivism. And we come out of there with not only friendships, but determination and commitments to do things together. We multiply our forces. We become part of groups and organizations. We're forming campuses. And our goal is to form a campus of Red Pill University in every county in the United States. And moving beyond that, actually, we'll be doing the same thing in other countries. Because we need boots on the ground. We understand that you don't build a movement from the top down. You don't say, who we're going to put in the White House and start with that. You start from the bottom up. And then that's what gives you the power to determine who goes in the White House. So we're building at the lower level, the county levels. Then on and on and on. There's so much to learn there. And so I'm not going to bore anybody any more than this. I'll just say if this rings a bell in your subconscious mind and you want to learn more, a good place to start is redpillexpo.org.
Yeah, and just for everybody, I can't, I guess, look, the vast majority of my subscribers come from the crypto community, and I try very, very hard to educate them on fiat currencies, and I think every one of my viewers have a very visceral experience getting red pilled in the area of money. And it's just like, what? That's how it works? Are
Hmm.
you kidding me? And then you look at the power and the value of that information, that and what it's done for your life over the last few years, being exposed to it. What a lot of people don't realize is there is just as much corruption and just as much red pilling that needs to happen in the area of education, media, healthcare, etc. And when just to have a glimpse and an understanding of all of the incentives and mechanisms and backdoors and corruption and laws and coercion and all of those different things, it really it ties it all up in a nice bundle to where all of a sudden you see the world clearer than you've ever seen it before. So I think it's a very, very powerful event. I highly recommend you guys get there. Ed, thank you so much for sharing your time with me. I know it's extremely valuable and I treasure it every time I get the opportunity. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, Max, thank you for inviting me. And I have to say that I enjoy speaking with you because you always ask these deep, deep questions, and it forces me to stop and think. Oh, what a painful thing that is, you know. But you're no lightweight, and I know that's the reason you've got such a great fan base. People know that what you say comes from a great deal of thought and experience. So it's a pleasure for me to be on your program, and I have to tell everybody that I've learned a lot from you.
Cool. Well, thank you very, very much. Take care and we'll see you soon.
Okay, bye-bye.